Alright, so the best show of the year has finished airing its season, and now we just have to settle for less for the rest of 2025. I mean, that might be a bit of an extreme statement, but I would be lying if I said I didn't mean it at least a little bit. I wasn't gonna make a video about the show, like, ever, but this season has left me with some thoughts I simply feel the need to share, so welcome back to Lumen, bitches! We're doing this. Severance is one of my favorite shows of the last few years, possibly one of my favorite shows ever made. I have been begging people to watch it since 2022, and yes, I am part of the group of people that had to wait 3 years for season 2. This shit took forever. And at long last, after 3 years of wait, the season arrived and aired for 10 weeks of absolute bliss. Now, during its first season, Severance was, for lack of a better term, an underground show. People didn't really know about it. I've said many times on this channel that up until very recently, Apple TV Plus hasn't been very good at marketing their shows, despite the fact that the majority of the best shows currently on television are Apple TV Plus originals. For the love of God, watch Shrinking. I am begging you, watch Shrinking! And Severance is by far the best example of that. Season 1 very largely flew under the radar, and it's only with Season 2 that the show became a bona fide hit. An absolute worldwide sensation propelled by a brilliant marketing campaign that included this viral moment of the 4 main characters of the show hanging out in an office space with glass walls in the middle of Grand Central Terminal in New York City. Which, in my humble opinion, was a genius promotional endeavor. Whoever had that idea deserves all the promotions. This made a lot of people hear about the show, get curious about the show, TikTok picked up the trail, and before long, millions of people were binging through season 1, getting their minds absolutely blown and joining the rest of us for season 2 as it started airing in January. So season 2 got the luxury of having all of its fans back from season 1 who have been waiting impatiently for 3 years, along with an absurdly massive new audience at the same time. New fans that grew the community by colossal numbers, and by week 2 of the new season, this show was all the internet was talking about. And that has been, for the most part, a really good thing. It's nice to see that an original series with such a weird and unique concept can become a hit in the middle of what seems to be a never-ending sea of reboots and revival series and franchise projects. I really like that a new massive fandom gets to have a weekly appointment to geek out about a show that has a lot to be talked about. I don't think we've had something on that scale since like the Game of Thrones Sunday nights. It's just really cool to have a large-scale weekly rendezvous again, and Severance 100% is the show that deserves that hype.
Welcome back, Marcus. In a minute.
For the uninitiated, Severance is a bizarre mystery drama about a man named Mark Scout, a grieving widower who cannot bring himself to move forward with his life 2 years after losing his wife in a tragic car accident. In order to spare himself from the never-ending pain he lives with, Mark decides to join a company named Lumen and to go under the severance procedure. Lumen is an extremely powerful and secretive biotechnology corporation that created a device that can split a person's mind in 2. That device, called the severance chip, is implanted into the brains of certain Lumen employees and can then be activated and deactivated in different areas of the building, meaning there is a version of Mark that exists only at work and only ever exists at work, with no memories of the outside world, and another version of Mark, the original, that exists outside of work and has absolutely no memories of what goes on in the office. He drives to work in the morning at 9, he blinks, and then it's 5 p.m. and he's leaving the office. He has no idea what his actual job is, he has no idea who his coworkers are, his bosses, nothing. He doesn't even know what his desk looks like. As for his other personality, the Mark that exists only in the office, he has no idea who he is, where he comes from, where he lives. He doesn't know any of his family members, any of his friends outside of work, and he certainly has no idea he had a wife that died 2 years ago. Essentially, these are 2 different people living in the same body. Mark is getting used to this unusual lifestyle, and he uses it as a way to cope with his crippling grief, but things take an extremely dark turn when, one day, Mark is suddenly approached by a mysterious man who claims to be his best friend from work. He reveals to Mark that Lumen is not what it appears to be on the surface, and he exposes him to terrifying revelations that throw Mark in the middle of a sinister conspiracy about the true nature of Lumen. And before long, Mark's life is changed in a way he could have never imagined. Season 1 of Severance is basically perfect television. And you know me, I do not use the word perfect lightly. It is one of the rare seasons of TV I can think of where even if I nitpick like the overanalyzing asshole I am, I can't really come up with anything to criticize it. The story is crazy, the pacing is flawless, the characters are genius, every single one of them. There isn't a single character in this show that is anything less than fantastic. Even the side characters you only see for a few minutes are fucking fascinating. The acting, the dialogue, the twists, everything is handled perfectly. This season of television is phenomenal on every possible standpoint. I already said it 3 years ago in my video about the top 10 shows of 2022. Severance was number 1, and I said it was the definition of a 10 out of 10 no notes. Again, even if I try to nitpick, I cannot find anything about this first season to criticize. It is genius from start to finish. The entire mystery around Lumen is some of the best storytelling I've ever seen. The character arcs are so fucking compelling. The plot as a whole has this addictive complexity to it that makes you ask so many questions, and the show's weird-ass tone just makes it better. Because Severance, for all intents and purposes, is a pretty dark show. It's a show about grief, about capitalism, about workers' exploitation, about a number of human ethical matters, and it's a show that subtly asks the very difficult question of what makes a person a person. But despite being a pretty sinister show thematically, Severance is also really funny. And the way the show has to play with that line and that balance is a fucking masterclass. Severance is one of the few shows where you can get a scene that is ridiculous and absurd with an almost slapstick comedy tone, and then one line of dialogue will instantly shift the scene. And just like flicking a switch, it goes from being hilarious and ridiculous to extremely creepy and unsettling. It's an insanely difficult thing to pull off, and the fact that it manages to do it so consistently is just a testament to how brilliant the writing of this show is. The cast is on fire. Everyone is. There isn't a single actor in this show that isn't at 150% capacity. Adam Scott gives the best performance of his career. John Turturro somehow manages to outdo himself as if he had anything to prove. Christopher Walken is in here and he's just doing his Christopher Walken thing, but it fucking works because it's fucking Christopher Walken. Patricia Arquette, who definitively has nothing to fucking prove to anyone, still gives the best performance of her career by a landslide. It's not even close. She's always been good. It makes no fucking sense how good she is in this. And then there's a bunch of other actors I had never heard about that just completely rocked my world. Tremel Tillman, Deachin Lockman, my new crush by the way. It is just unfair to be this good looking. Britt Lauer, who in my opinion is one of the biggest recent revelations in the acting world. This woman is fucking gifted. You get the idea. This cast is otherworldly. Absolute menaces. World-class ensemble. And they never ever fail to deliver and do justice to the incredible and unapologetically complex story they're bringing to life.
You sick?
Maybe. Petey was sniffling yesterday.
If you breathe on me, I'll rip your larynx out.
Wow, that went right to 10.
And famously, the first season ends with what I consider to be one of the greatest cliffhangers in the history of TV. The absolutely insane scene where Annie Mark realizes his Audi's wife is Miss Casey, Lumen's therapist, and he runs to his sister to tell her before his Severance ship is switched back to Audi Mark, and...
We're prisoners! She's alive!
Blackout. For 3 fucking years! Do you know how long that shit was? 3 years, my guy. Ben Stiller, come here. What the hell is wrong with you? 3 years? 3 años? 3 ans, ma gueule! Mais t'as cru que c'était la série à ton père, en fait? So with all the wait, obviously, we had time to ruminate on all the stuff that went down in that first season. The theories started fusing everywhere. We all wanted answers. Everything in the show felt like a conspiracy. I just wanted to sit down like I'm in a ContraPoints video about conspiracies and go deep into the layers of Lumen and obsessing over every detail, every line of dialogue. I wanted to know every... What is that, a coffee machine? Now, the wait for season 2 made me nervous because we started to get wind of major delays in production because of alleged disagreements between the two bosses of the show, Ben Stiller and Dan Erickson. It took them a significantly larger amount of time to write this second season than they thought it would, because figuring out how to tell this story was proving to be a much bigger challenge and a much more complex problem than anticipated. Production on season 2 started almost a year later than what was initially planned. And then, to make things even worse, when they finally did start shooting season 2, about halfway through shooting the season, the WGA strikes happened in 2023, so production had to shut down, which delayed the show even more. And hearing about all the issues they ran into while writing the season, I was freaking out, man. With season 1 being one of the most polished, flawless pieces of TV we've ever gotten, I was starting to get properly nervous about season 2, especially back in January, because a lot of the shows I swore would be masterpieces in 2024 turned out to be the biggest disappointments. I made a whole video about Dune Prophecy. It was one of the shows I was the most excited about in my entire life, and it just broke my heart. This show was so mid. So I was really nervous about Severance letting me down. I kind of assumed it would be virtually impossible for it to be as perfect as the first season, but if it was even 80% as good, I was gonna consider that a fucking miracle, because this show feels like lightning in a bottle. I was praying that the production issues weren't going to kill the magic. And, oh no, not even a little bit. This show still fucking slaps. This show is still a spectacular home run. However, a lot of people were also really disappointed with season 2 and pointed out some issues that I sort of agreed with in some places, and that's something I really want to get into as well. So we're gonna talk about all that. This is gonna be a long video, so sit down and grab some snacks. It's gonna take me a while, and I can't be praising Kier on an empty stomach. So here's something about me. I enjoy cooking a lot, but I'm bad at it, and I'm also too busy to do it regularly anyway. And I've been through countless cycles of just endlessly ordering takeout because it's convenient, but that doesn't include the healthiest choices. So, long story short, I needed a change, and that is where the homies over at Factor came in like superheroes to save my ass. The perfect solution to all of my life questions. About food, I mean. I'm not sure they know if aliens are real. Gone are the times of having to figure out what I'm gonna eat every day. I can skip the groceries, skip the overpriced takeout trap. Factor is cheaper and way more delicious. You can get chef-crafted, healthy, restaurant-quality meals delivered right to your door. They're ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, which means more time for you, my guy. It's tasty, it's healthy, and most of all, it is incredibly convenient, both in terms of time and brain energy. Factor meals eliminate the hassle of prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. You simply heat and savor the good stuff. Easy peasy. Personally, it helps me stay on a good routine of having balanced meals every day, no matter what my schedule looks like, which is good because my schedule has been all over the place lately. I've been working on a lot of stuff, and this has been a total lifesaver. They have such an insane variety of different options. You can stock your fridge and eat something different every day, whether it be for breakfast, lunch, dinner, or for a snack. It's the ultimate solution. I love it. And you guys are in luck because Factor is hooking you up real good here. Right now, head to factor75.com or click the link in the description below and use the code 50SpaceNinja at checkout to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. My guy, that is crazy. That's code 50SpaceNinja at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box Trust me, you won't regret it. They're the real deal. Thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring this video. You guys are the best. And let's get back to the show. So season 2 of Severance picks up a few days after the events of the season 1 finale. After screaming, "She's alive!" Mark blinks and he suddenly is back in the infamous Lumen elevator. Somehow, back at work. But his coworkers at MDR are no longer here, and now he has to figure out on his own why Lumen is hiding the fact that his wife is still alive and seemingly held captive at Lumen under a severed personality that makes her completely unaware of who she is. Season 2 is absolutely bonkers on so many levels. From the first shot in the very first scene, the show is already being next level. They're basically like, "Oh yeah, baby, we're fucking back. Watch Mark running endlessly through the corridors of Lumen for like 10 minutes. And you know what? I watched, and I loved every second of it. As soon as the season begins, it feels like you're right back in the atmosphere of the show. Severance has a very unique vibe that is mostly kept running through its incredible aesthetics. This show has a look that is distinctly different from the flat imagery of like 95% of TV shows today, where things always are so dark that you can't really see anything that's going on. Severance is bright, it is sharp, and a lot of its visual identity plays with the idea of the uncanny valley. It's showing you things that you're familiar with, but that are just off enough that you notice it's not quite normal. And it's really in jumping back into a new season after 3 years of wait that I realized just how immersive this show is. The first 3 episodes are very good at establishing the new status quo after the entire debacle in the finale. Lumen shifts things around a bit, Cobell is no longer the manager of the severed floor, Milkshake takes over, there's a fucking kid running MDR now.
Mark W?
Why are you a child?
Because of when I was born.
Everything is very weird and very consistent with Severance shenanigans. There's new mysteries, new intriguing scenes that leave you scratching your head, but I think everyone will agree with me when I say that this season truly starts in episode 4. Episode 4 is the one where everybody locked in. This episode is absolutely wild, and many consider it to be the best episode of the season. Many consider it to be the best episode of the show. The confirmation of Helly really being Helena Egan in disguise was absolutely crazy. Some people had called it there were clues left in the first 3 episodes. I think a lot of people caught it with that shot of Helena's hand looking for the button to turn the computer on when MDR returns to work, which was a good catch because I somehow missed that. But for me, the giveaway was right before that moment, in the very long scene where our 4 protagonists all take the elevator down to the severed floor. And it's a sound thing. Each time they go in, the elevator dings twice. The first ding is to signal the elevator is going down, and the second ding is to signal that the severance chip of the person in the elevator has been activated. And so you watch the characters go through the process one by one, and I immediately noticed that Helly was the only character who didn't get a second ding, meaning her severance chip was never activated. I was paranoid about it for the next 2 episodes, and lo and behold, the final scene of season 4 confirms it. The entirety of Woe's Hollow was such a strange experience, but a very well executed change of pace for the show, and it really gives the characters a chance to shine, mainly Irving, who just owns the fuck out of that episode. It's intense, it's creepy, it's mysterious, it's funny, it is everything I love about this show packaged into one hell of an episode. And for the love of God, somebody give Britt Lauer all the fucking awards that have ever existed. I know I already gave her flowers like 5 minutes ago, I don't care, I'll do it again. Her work in this show and the insane subtlety of her acting, oscillating between Helena Egan, Helly R, and Helena Egan pretending to be Helly R, needs to be studied in every university, even if it's a fucking law school. Thank you very much. That said though, most people's favorite episode is episode 4, but I do not share this opinion. I'm just gonna say it. Episode 7 is easily the best episode of the show. I think it might be one of the best episodes of television ever made. It is an absolute masterpiece of filmmaking on almost every level imaginable. It's very rare that a flashback episode stands out as being one of the best episodes of a show, but this one takes the crown, and it's not even close. Getting to see the whole quote-unquote origin story of the show by following the romance between Mark and Gemma before the events of season 1 was incredible. It is so emotional, so heartbreaking. Finding out a lot of their love story had to do with them struggling to get pregnant and Gemma suffering a miscarriage that absolutely broke them. That shit was hard to watch, man. But it is balanced with so much beauty and romance that shows how much they cared for one another. All of it in this retro film aesthetic that makes it look like a movie from the 70s. I was just, my eyes were glued to the screen. This is the first time we get to see these two characters be together, and we are formally introduced to Gemma in the testing floor. And this was something they had to nail. And you know what? They absolutely did. I fell in love with Gemma immediately. I don't think I've ever been on board with a character this quickly. She's fantastic, and learning the way Lumen keeps her prisoner in that place, and that she has been severed over 20 times and has up to 25 different personalities inside of her mind, maybe even more, because we don't know if Miss Casey is one of the MDR personalities. For all we know, that's just one more. It's wild, it's crazy, and again, it just adds a layer to the mystery of Lumen and their intentions that I find fascinating. Episode 7 is an instant classic of television. I love it so fucking much. I've watched it 3 times and it gets better every single time. Here's the thing, though. After episode 7, the season kinda hits a bit of a curve, and I think this is where the show started to lose some people. Episode 8 was the first offender, which seems to be what a lot of people consider to be the first bad episode of Severance. A lot of people really disliked episode 8, but I kinda disagree. I liked it. It's a very slow episode that follows Harmony Cobell as she returns to the town where she grew up. We find out that entire towns have been built for the development of Lumen decades ago, and those towns have since been abandoned and left mostly deserted, and people that are still there live in misery. It's bleak, and it gives a larger vision of the scope of Lumen's influence. The show is very careful to keep us in the dark about the world around the characters. We don't know what year this story takes place. We don't know where they are in America. The only city we see, aside from Cobell's hometown in episode 8, is the city of Kier, where the characters are all located. We don't know anything else about the world of this show. But yeah, I liked episode 8. It's far from being the best episode of the season, but I liked seeing this different part of the world and getting more insight on a character as enigmatic as Harmony Cobell. Like in the episode before that, Ragabi says Cobell can't be trusted because she was raised by Lumen. I took that as a hyperbolic statement, but this episode then confirms it wasn't hyperbolic. Cobell was literally raised by Lumen. We find out that it is very common for Lumen to employ children. Literal child labor, and Harmony's entire life has been dedicated to this fucking company and its weird beliefs. She was basically raised by a cult that happens to also be one of the most powerful companies in the fucking world, apparently. We see the home where she grew up. We see that she has definitely not dealt with her mother's passing. She reconnects with someone who might have been an old flame she was forced to leave behind to serve Lumen. And of course, we get the absolutely insane reveal that Harmony Cobell created Severance. She designed everything about it, and it's suggested that she did it when she was very young, and she was so brainwashed by Lumen that she was essentially berated into giving all the credit to James Egan. She literally handed Lumen its most powerful weapon and accepted to just stand aside as a man who has power over her takes all the credit for her creation. This explains why Cobell was so confident about telling Lumen they are not in a position to get rid of her at the beginning of the season. She is way more important to all of this than we even imagine. Surprisingly, though, this major revelation is never mentioned again for the rest of the season, which was a bit annoying if I'm being honest, but it has major implications for the future of the story. So overall, yes, this is one of the weaker episodes of the show, but it is, in my opinion, a good episode still. In all honesty, there's only one episode this entire season that I genuinely didn't like, and that was episode 9, which is genuinely the first time that the show left me feeling disappointed. And I know a lot of people were annoyed with this episode. Everybody and their moms talked about it online. And for those who already didn't like episode 8, getting these 2 episodes back to back was kind of a mood killer. This is where a lot of complaints online started to arise about this season. And the thing is, I understand why episode 9 was the way it was. It's all just set up for the finale, but you can sense it having to swerve away from addressing very obvious things, and it's done in a way that makes the characters come across a little stupid at times, and it bothered me because it's very unusual for this show to do that. This episode drags, it's meandering, and it feels like it's just waiting for the finale to arrive. We will talk about what annoyed me with it in more detail later in the video though. But rest assured, this episode might have left me feeling disappointed, but that disappointment did not last. And that's because episode 10 is nothing less than a modern TV monument. The season 2 finale of Severance is one of the most spectacular episodes of television of our time. It is an hour and 16 minutes of filmmakers, writers, and actors just flexing on us from beginning to end. It's absolutely wild. The scene of Audi Mark and Any Mark finally getting to talk to one another exceeded all of my expectations. In trying to figure out a way for them to communicate, which was a big part of the first half of the season, I imagined so many ways for the two of them to meet and so many scenarios depicting how that would go. But I really think the show outdid itself with this scene. Because the moment this conversation begins, the moment they actually manage to exchange words, I could feel myself getting nervous. Because in my head, since season 1, there was never a plausible scenario in which Any Mark and Audi Mark would ever get along. I always anticipated this conversation to go terribly. Audi Mark Scout, wouldn't be able to stomach his Any. Mark Scout has always been presented to us as a somewhat self-centered individual. Like, he's kind of a selfish guy. He's also just not a very nice person. He's short-tempered and impatient. He's impolite. He's often showed to us being unnecessarily rude to people. And sure, some of that is probably exacerbated by him grieving his wife, but episode 7 of season 2 shows us that Mark was already like that in some capacity when Gemma was still around and his life was normal and even happy. He's not necessarily a bad person, he might even be a good person, but he's definitely not a nice person. And when you pair that with a big reality of Mark Scout's character along with his sister Devon and many people outside of Lumen, the possibility of that conversation going well is close to non-existent. The big theme I'm talking about here is, of course, the reoccurring reality of dehumanizing Enies. From the second they start talking, you can tell Mark Scout does not view Mark S as a person. He talks down to him, he's incredibly dismissive of his feelings, his tone is incredibly condescending, and the compassion he shows towards him in that first message is incredibly disingenuous and performative. Any Mark is initially blown away by the fact that he's actually talking to his Audi. That is absolutely insane to him, like it would be for any. And you can tell he feels joy the first time he sees him talk, but that quickly changes. Any Mark might be a bit naive, but he's not oblivious. It doesn't take long for him to see that Audi Mark is not being very receptive to his worries. Audi Mark is ready to say anything to get Gemma back. He even goes as far as telling Any Mark that he's been reintegrating and that he is willing to complete the process if he agrees to help him free Gemma. And you can tell by the way he's saying it that he is fucking lying. It made me feel so frustrated for Any Mark. And it's not just that Mark Scout is being selfish in that moment by lying to him. I don't think he even believes that it matters if he lies because, again, he doesn't see Mark S as a person. He fully intends to let his Any disappear after this.
You know what I think? I think the second you get your wife back, you forget I ever existed. I think that I disappear along with every Any down there.
I'm sorry, but Any Mark is right. Audi Mark fully intends to fuck him over, as confirmed by Devon just a second later.
He's a fucking child. He won't listen.
Let me speak to him.
I mentioned reintegration. He basically called bullshit.
Well, he's not wrong, right?
He talks to his Any like he's trying to convince a child to eat his vegetables. He's incredibly condescending, which is on brand for him. The way he punches down on Any Mark's feelings about Helly is just so fucking frustrating, man.
Miss Google told me you like someone down there? Helena Egan, right? Your Any name's Helene?
It's Helly, actually. Helly. Which you'd know if you'd ever taken an interest in my life.
Before tonight when you need something.
And the thing is, he maybe could have convinced him if he hadn't proven that he has not had an interest in his innie's life by getting Helly's name wrong. Which is an interesting parallel to a previous episode where Mark Scout meets Helena Egan in a restaurant and she gets Gemma's name wrong.
And I know you've already been through so much with losing your wife and all. Hannah.
Gemma.
Right, Gemma.
By calling her Helene, he confirms to Innie Mark that all of this compassion he was shown was performative and that he doesn't actually care. And unfortunately for him, he is meeting Innie Mark at a time where he is particularly fed up with people trying to manipulate him. In that moment, for Innie Mark, his outie is no better than an Egan, and he essentially tells him to go fuck himself. This attempt at connecting is a complete disaster. These two cannot possibly understand each other. They're too different. I will say, I was absolutely convinced that outie Mark was going to convince Innie Mark by mentioning Petey, who was Innie Mark's best friend and the only person they knew in common aside from Miss Cobell. But weirdly enough, the whole Petey thing is something that the show just seems to have forgotten about. It was the only thing they had in common. I was convinced it was going to play a big role, but somehow no mention of him this entire scene. But regardless, I think this scene is perfect. It is such a fantastic display of both versions of Mark and their character development up to this point. Mark Scout is as selfish as ever in this moment. The closer he is to getting Gemma back, the more desperate he gets, and his morals are flying out the window. And Mark S, on the other hand, is more on edge than we've ever seen him. He knows his days are numbered, and he is way more willing to stand up for himself and for other innies who don't get a say in when or how they will just cease to exist. The scene of Helly being confronted by James Egan is one of my favorite scenes in the entire show and an expertly crafted setup for season 3. I found that Helly was not as active of a character as she was in season 1, which is mostly due to the fact that she only appears in about half of the season, since after the season 1 finale, she only reappears in the final scene of episode 4 and then truly reintegrates the story in episode 5. And given the fact that episode 7 is all about Gemma and is mostly a flashback episode, and nobody aside from Miss Cobell appears in episode 8, Helly is effectively in the show for only about 4 of the 10 episodes of the season. She just doesn't have much to do, and that was going to be one of my biggest complaints about this season, but I'm not gonna lie. This scene makes up for it entirely in just a few seconds, because if this scene says one thing, it is, oh, don't worry, Season 3 might entirely be about Helly. She might be the most important person in that entire show. Now, this is a scene where a lot of people were expecting something crazier, and I do think this is an example of people getting way too carried away with wanting absolutely everything in the show to have like a secret hidden meaning full of clues or whatever. The end of episode 9 had the first part of the scene where James Egan shows up and says, "You tricked me, my Helly," and everyone lost their shit trying to figure out the super duper deep meaning of this phrase and fusing away with theories saying we don't yet know the meaning of this meticulously placed line. And I felt like I was going crazy because the first time I watched it, I thought it was really obvious that James was referring to the season 1 finale where he met Helly for the first time without knowing because she tricked him into believing she was Helena, and it's the last time they saw each other. It was kind of clear. Are you guys watching the show? Stop trying to mystify every second of every episode. Sometimes the show is being very straightforward with us. Not every line is a prophecy. Relax. But yeah, they come face to face and James reveals to Helly that he doesn't love his daughter because he can no longer see Keir in her. So in a desperate attempt to find a worthy heir, he sired many illegitimate children in the shadows. But he never found what he wanted. Until Helena went through the severance procedure, creating Helly. James says he sees the spirit of Keir in Helly, which essentially makes her the most important person to him. And that, to me, is the coolest revelation of the episode. There is such an extreme sense of danger in James Egan saying that he considers Helly to be his true daughter, worthy of Keir, because that could mean so much for Helly's future in this story, and it started to make me wonder if Lumen maybe has the ability to use Severance to erase a person's original identity. Is James shame going to permanently sever Helena, essentially killing her to have Helly take over and be the only mind in that body? It's fascinating, especially considering the fact that season 2 makes a point of showing us that Helena isn't any more free than the innies. We see that she develops a bit of a fixation with Helly, and more specifically, she becomes increasingly jealous of her romance with Mark. I think in her eyes, Helly has a freedom of spirit that she cannot have because of who she is, and she's envious to have that for herself, to have that romance for herself, to the point where she goes and tricks Mark into sleeping with her while she pretends to be Helly, which is essentially, well, rape. So what will happen? What will Helena be capable of when she finds out that her father considers her severed personality to be his rightful heir? I don't know. That's just one theory among dozens of others, but that has officially become the most intriguing thing for me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes in season 3. This scene had me pumped. Dylan returning to the office and seeing that his Audi communicated with him after his request to quit was surprisingly emotional in a sense. We've been conditioned to see Audi Dylan as kind of a loser and a bit of a dick. We've never really seen him be anything other than frustrated, annoyed, or dismissive, so the fact that he ends up being the person that offers the biggest amount of genuine compassion towards his innie was a very pleasant surprise that says a lot about his character. I love that he acknowledges his desire to be a better man and tells his innie that he is an inspiration for growth. It was such an unexpected moment for him, and most of all, in a move that is the most humanizing to an innie, he gives him a choice. He essentially tells his innie that he gets to choose whether he keeps existing or not, which is something none of the other characters would ever consider. I absolutely love that scene. It was great. Also, Milkshake bolting out of the room like Sonic the Hedgehog is one of the most random pieces of comedy I've ever seen, and it was hilarious.
I shall leave you to read it in solitude.
The whole choreography and merriment scene was a fucking acid trip, but it was really fun. There is a very specific cultural significance to Milkshake, a black man leading an HBCU marching band. It is no coincidence that the overwhelming majority of the people in the band are black. It's a very strong centerpiece of African American culture that represents their individual HBCUs, and Tremel Tillman, who plays Milkshake, graduated from an HBCU in Louisiana, so it was just a very loud and proud expression of Milkshake identity in this performance, but in classic Severance fashion, they managed to keep it weird in a way only they can. But the finale really kicks it into high gear when Mark ventures into the hallways to find the door to the testing floor. And that's when shit really gets crazy. Look, the finale would have already been great if it had been those first 50-ish minutes, but guys, I mean it when I say the last 20 minutes of the finale might be some of the greatest television ever made. It is so fucking balls to the wall and so rewarding on an emotional level. It's crazy. You gotta understand, Severance is a show where you essentially watch a lot of characters being on the brink of a meltdown, but that are always fighting to keep their composure. Everybody has a facade to uphold. The last 20 minutes of the finale is the point where all of those walls come down. Everybody starts losing their fucking shit, and it is so satisfying to watch. Narratively speaking, it feels like a very earned climax. It is very focused on the characters, which is something important I'm gonna touch on more later in this video. And despite the fact that I do have a tiny bit of an issue with that, I also think it is a major strength for the specific way they go about bringing that climax. It very much feels like every individual character arc culminates into this inevitable point. The fight scene in the hallway is so brilliantly directed. I don't know how they managed to make it this stressful, but also so funny. Again, that's an insanely difficult balance to strike, but it just works so well. The show holds back a lot from depicting violence on screen, so when it gets to a point where violence is inevitable, it feels shocking but earned, and this scene is fucking gruesome. Gwendolyn Christie gets to shine in such a unique way in this sequence. She's barely in the show, but she almost outshined everyone in that episode. If you don't know, Gwendolyn Christie had sworn off doing fight scenes after the end of Game of Thrones, but she said she agreed to do this scene and break that promise after 7 years because she felt it was such a unique depiction of a battle that she just couldn't say no to it. And at the same time, it kind of closes the loop of the goat mystery that everyone was freaking out about. I'm gonna be super honest, I didn't care much for the goats thing. I kind of assumed it wouldn't have that big of an importance in the story, and that's mainly because Dan Erickson admitted in an interview recently that when they introduced the goats in that one scene in season 1, they actually had no idea what it was or what it meant. They just wanted to do something random and weird to throw the audience off, and I think they ended up being taken a little bit off guard when they realized how much audiences stuck onto that scene. So I assumed they were just going to give it a quick explanation without much impact on the story, and that was kind of the case. The goats are apparently there to serve as cult-like sacrifices to Keir. Okay, sure, go off, Emil.
Emil is the name of the goat.
Oh, okay.
The accidental kill of Mr. Drummond in the elevator is one of my favorite TV moments of all time. It is such a clever use of the show's lore, still writing that perfect line between being genuinely horrifying and just so fucking funny. Adam Scott is just on fire in this episode. He manages to play so many weird and different dynamics in such short amounts of time, but every switch is handled perfectly. Again, this is easily the best role he's ever had, and you can tell he is giving it everything he has. There are no words to describe just how insanely good he is in this show. The scene of Mark reuniting with Gemma is something I was waiting for so hard. Something I was holding in such high regard in my mind. It felt like one of those scenes you know the writers are aware they are not allowed to fuck up. And if I'm being completely honest, I genuinely don't think the show could have done it better. That scene is basically perfect. Even the setup, from the fight in the hallway, the accidental elevator kill, everything was so well executed. The moment he finds her in the Cold Harbor room, getting her out of that room so she can switch back to her original personality, and the actual reunion is so fucking good and so creative. In the span of like 5 minutes, the writers make Mark and Gemma interact in 4 different combinations of personalities. First, Mark Scout meets the Cold Harbor personality of Gemma. He gets her out, and then we finally get the real reunion of Mark and Gemma Scout. They get a short moment to exist together again after 2 long years, and then they run away. They get in the elevator, but they arrive on the severed floor, and we get another combination. We now switch to Any Mark and Miss Casey, which signals to Any Mark that his Audi accomplished his part of the mission, so he rushes to get a confused Miss Casey to the stairs, and once he does, Miss Casey walks out of the severed floor, and we get the final combination, which is the most heartbreaking one. Gemma meets Any Mark for the first time, but Any Mark completed his mission. He got Gemma out, but he doesn't know Gemma. He doesn't love her. He doesn't care for her. He did his part by choosing to save her life, but now that he's done it, he chooses his next move for himself. He hesitates for a while between wanting to do what feels right to him and what he was told was the right thing to do. But in the end, in this gut-wrenching final scene, he chooses not to follow Gemma to be with Helly. It's a heartbreaking moment, especially because I don't think Gemma knows that Mark is severed, so she's not only horrified by this and scared, she's also probably very confused. From her perspective, she just watches her husband walk away with Helena Egan.
Stop the cap. Stop the cap right now. Stop the cap.
This entire scene, the last like 20 minutes of the finale, it's all just 11 out of 10 brilliant television. Insane storytelling. I was on the edge of my seat. I loved every second of it. Those last 20 minutes alone are like the best piece of TV to come out, probably this whole decade. I genuinely did not think they would ever be able to beat the cliffhanger from the season 1 finale. Nothing in my mind could even come close to Mark running to his sister yelling, "She's alive!" But goddamn, man, this season finale really steps up to the plate. There's something so tragically bittersweet in watching Mark and Helly run like this. They choose each other. They choose to live together, knowing full well that there is no future for them. Mark just solidified himself as public enemy #1 for Lumen, and Helly is literally an Egan. They can only exist on the severed floor, and that means they literally have nowhere to run away to. Mark and Helly often feel like teenagers being in love. They don't think about anything, they just feel, and they're driven by those feelings, and this moment is exactly that. They're running, smiling at each other, laughing and holding hands, but the season ends on a freeze frame, and it was very deliberate that the frame they picked to freeze on was a frame where that excitement is gone. They're no longer smiling. They look worried, scared, because they know they are running towards nothing. The same way Miss Cobell told Mark at the beginning of the episode.
Mark. Oh. There'll be no honeymoon ending for you and Helly R.
And to me, that's an incredibly impressive way to end the season. There is something so frustrating in seeing Mark and Gemma be so close to escaping, only for Mark S to then turn around and refuse to finish the plan so he can go with Helly. But at the same time, I want Mark S and Helly R to succeed. And that's the brilliance of this weird romantic entanglement. I am rooting for Mark and Gemma just as much as I am rooting for Mark S and Helly R. And as somebody who particularly dislikes love triangles, I have to say, this is probably the most creative incarnation of a love triangle I have ever seen. I mean, technically it's more of a love square because it technically involves 4 people, but it physically involves 3 people. The hopeful tragedy of Mark S and Helly R is so impactful to me. You have to watch these 2 people who you know have no future because they basically don't have a way to exist as people on their own terms. They choose to run away together, knowing there is nowhere for them to run but their own death. They're only buying themselves a few minutes of life, but they choose to do it together. I will admit that for most of the episode, my nitpicking brain kept wondering how all of this could happen with no intervention at all from Lumen. Like, is there not a single security guard on the severed floor? Or on the testing floor? Like, my guy, you have no safety net for what you consider to be one of the most important operations in the history of humanity? Why is that, my guy? You want to chime in here, Kier? But anyways, I'm just being a nitpicky idiot here. This finale is a triumph. It is spectacular. I love it so fucking much. We haven't had TV this good in a really long time. Huh. I mean, I'm done talking about the season. Looks like the video isn't close to being over. I mean, what more could I possibly have to say? I had some issues with Season 2, let's talk about it. Okay, so yes, alright, Season 2 of Severance is absolutely phenomenal, but unlike Season 1, it is not perfect, and I think there are a few cracks here and there that I had a really hard time ignoring. I think I can boil it down to 3 major points, so let's do it that way. Number 1. The Lumen mystery. You know me, I like my mysteries, and boy is Severance a good one. Lumen is one of the most enigmatic entities television has ever had, and I gotta admit, after all the brilliant mystery establishing in Season 1, I was kinda surprised to see that Season 2 had absolutely no interest in this mystery. Like, at all. Most of the things I was expecting to see come to light in Season 2 were just never addressed, and I don't know how I feel about that. Because it didn't ruin the season for me. I love this season, that's why I've been gushing about it for the past 2 hours, but while a lot happens in Season 2, we don't get much of an explanation for anything, really. For lack of a better description, it feels like this season just refuses to indulge in its own mystery. Because if you really think about it, aside from a couple of very surface level reveals, we don't know anything more about Lumen and its goals than we did when the show started. There's so many things I wanted the show to dive into this season to keep that mystery going. So many questions that I wanted the show to explore. Like, what actually is Lumen? Why are people talking so weird there? What What are the Egans trying to do exactly? What's the deal with the water tower? What actually is the board? Who are they? Why do they only speak through Natalie? What is this mysterious revolving James Egan mentions in season 1? What was that weird-ass waffle party about? Who was the man in the hallway in the first episode of season 2? What was literally anything we saw in episode 4 of season 2? Literally, what was that? What is Woe's Hollow? Were they actually outside, or was this a weird simulation? How did they get a functioning unplugged TV in the middle of the wilderness? What the hell were those shadow clones things? Seriously, so many weird stuff happened in this episode, and nobody ever asks anything about it. None of it is mentioned again after that episode ends. I mentioned earlier that I found it weird that PD is never brought up again, and I just don't understand why nobody in the show asks questions about him. Like, seriously, why did his Audi reintegrate? Why did he become a target for Lumen? He says in season 1 that they're out to kill him. Why? What did he discover? What did he know? Why did his innie secretly start mapping out the severed floor? What are the 3 houses hidden on the severed floor that he shows on his map with a note saying people might be living there? Again, I find it really weird that the show just kind of forgets about PD, especially since Mark spent so much time with Ragabi this season. I'm shocked that PD never came up. She's the only one who knows what PD knew before he died. Oh, and speaking of which, Ragabi! What the fuck? This character is so vague. She just shows up at the most random times and speaks in riddles. She knows so much but says nothing, and then she always just pieces out of the season without really explaining anything. In season 1, we find out she was a scientist who worked at Lumen and used to carry out the severance procedure, but we don't know why she left. We don't know why she's trying to reintegrate people. She says in season 1 that she wants to, quote, finish what PD started, and then that's it. We never get any more information on any of this. She's around a lot this season. She even lives with Mark for a while, but for some reason, Mark doesn't ask any questions about anything. He doesn't ask about PD, he doesn't ask about her goals. He just kind of blindly trusts her out of desperation after finding out his dead wife isn't dead, but it's still kind of odd to me that no questions ever come up. It's kind of the same in episode 9, which is part of the reason why I dislike this episode so much. Cobell literally reveals to Mark that Gemma will be killed once he completes Cold Harbor, which is probably the most important piece of information Mark has received this entire show. But for some reason, Miss Cobell reveals this, and both Mark and Devin just look at her like, okie dokie? Like, really? No follow-up questions. This lady who clearly knows what's going on is answering your questions for the first time, and suddenly you have no questions to ask? You're not even gonna be like, okay, what the fuck is Cold Harbor though? Why are you so passive about this, my guy? And by the end of the season, we still don't know anything about Lumen's grand agenda. Some people will say, but they told us what Cold Harbor is. But did they though? What's the goal of Cold Harbor? Episode 7 tells us the files correspond to different personalities Gemma has. Yes, we find out Cold Harbor is the last one of them. And then in episode 9, we find out Gemma will die when Cold Harbor is completed. Okay, sure, but here's the thing. We still don't really know what any of that means. We don't know what the actual purpose of this is. We still don't know what Lumen actually is and what they're doing. We don't know what happens after Cold Harbor. We don't know what their goal is. We still don't know what any of this shit is about. I think the lack of addressing it takes a very specific worry in my brain that relates back to the goats not having a particular meaning when they were introduced. As somebody who is obsessed with well-crafted mysteries, a part of me is a little afraid that Severance is a show that is very good at making things mysterious without really knowing where any of those mysteries are actually going. Or as I like to call it, pulling a Marlene King. Because that's a pattern I recognize from a lot of shows based around mysteries that ended up never being solved for the audience. Especially when it comes to shows where everything has a hidden meaning, everything is a clue, pay attention to all you see and all you hear. That's why I don't really follow the fans who try to mystify absolutely every single second of of the show. The cinematographer and director of Severance, Jessica Lee Gagné, who is an absolute fucking genius by the way, did an interview after the finale aired where she very candidly admitted that a lot of the theories and wild connections people have made about certain moments of the show are complete coincidences that were never a part of their plans and that, to them, comes out of nowhere. I had a conversation with one of my best friends about the show, and he also had the same worry, and he specifically said that he was afraid Severance would turn into Lost, a show that kept its audience invested through the promise of answers around the mysterious setting of the story, which in the end is left mostly unanswered in the most unsatisfying way imaginable. And I fully get that. I am terrified of that happening with Severance. It is too special of a show. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that a lot of the things that drew me to this show in the first place is more of the mystery behind Lumen, the enigmas, the slow investigation into the company's secrets, and for lack of a better bottom line, we don't get any of that here. Severance Season 2 is unfortunately not very interested in exploring Lumen, and it focuses more on the characters and their relationships, which I don't hate, obviously. Every single character in this show is amazing. There genuinely isn't a single one I don't like. The character work in this series is fucking godly, but I would have enjoyed more of a balance in the show because when it comes to this mystery I am so invested in with every atom in my being, I feel like we're still at square one, and I understand why a lot of people were disappointed in the season because of that. Although I don't agree with everything, a lot of people complained about the show being too slow, and let the record show, I don't mind that. I like that Severance is a slow burn. It's one of its biggest strengths by far. This show is meticulously crafted, and it knows it needs to take its time. But as a mystery nerd who likes the process of slowly pulling back the layers of an enigma to get to a satisfying answer, I do wish that this season had given us more tangible bits of information regarding the Lumen mystery. That's it. I'm not saying everything had to be explained this season, I'm just a little surprised that practically none of it was even addressed. And I think there is no greater example of this than my next point, which is one of the most frustrating aspects of the season to me. Number 2. Irving. Irving is one of my favorite characters in the show. I think both versions of the character are fascinating, and John Turturro is as amazing as ever in this role. He's been one of the most interesting storylines to follow, and that is why I will say, if episode 9 turns out to be the actual ending of his storyline, I'm gonna be pretty pissed. And this kind of goes back to my thought about the show ignoring the Lumen mystery. Throughout the whole series, we are repeatedly shown that Audie Irving has been researching Severance and investigating Lumen while in close communication with someone on the other hand of a payphone. We don't know what he's looking for, we don't know what he knows, we don't know who he's secretly communicating with, we don't know why he has memories of the testing floor, especially since his innie doesn't know anything about it. I waited all season for the show to get to that, but instead, it's kind of ignored and we get a weird, abrupt relationship drama with Bert that leads to the most unfulfilling exit for Irv. Maybe this is my unpopular opinion of the month, I don't know, but I found that the sudden romantic tension between Irving and Bert kind of came out of nowhere in episode 9. Their innies were in love, that's something I was invested in, but these two Audies very much weren't. They met each other a grand total of 3 times, one of which was with Bert's husband and seemingly a pretext to keep Irving distracted while Lumen searched his home. Yes, the reveal that Bert used to be a hitman for Lumen who was severed to carry out assassinations without having to live it is interesting, and it seems like Lumen discovered that Irving was looking into them and asked Bert to take care of him. But Bert feeling this sympathy for Irv and letting him go, and Irv being so willing to take that exit while making a whole speech about wanting to be loved being the one thing he's ever wanted, it just felt off. Their romantic exchange at the train station came out of nowhere for me, I'm sorry. It feels like the first time the show brings a conclusion that feels unearned, and Irving not appearing in the finale makes me worried that this is just the end of his story. We don't have any confirmation that John Turturro is coming back for season 3, and again, if this shot of him riding into the sunset on a train with his dog really is the conclusion of his arc without any real closure on anything he was doing this entire show, I'm going to be really fucking annoyed at this. Number 3. Storylines that go nowhere. Okay, that may be a bit of an unfair title given the fact that the show is not over. Clearly, this is material that will probably play a bigger role in season 3, but I will be honest and admit that while watching this season, there is a lot of stuff that took a lot of time in the season that sort of didn't amount to anything. I think one of my biggest disappointments with this season by far is that the entirety of the Mark reintegrating storyline literally amounted to nothing. It had absolutely no impact on the story whatsoever. We spent so much time on the reintegration. Mark tries a more aggressive approach. He has this incident that makes him unconscious for a day, and I assume that after all of that, he was finally gonna wake up like fully reintegrated. I thought this was the point of it being more aggressive, and it seemed like a natural continuation for this reintegration to play a massive role in the final arc of the season. It felt like that's what the season was gearing towards the whole time. But after coming back from his mini coma in episode 7, Mark is just back to normal, kinda. He's just as severed as he's ever been, and aside from one quick mention in the finale, the reintegration is never brought up again and does not have any role in the conclusion of the season. We spend so much time on it, and I don't get why we had this whole side story about Ragabi doing this super dangerous and aggressive tweak to speed up the process of reintegration, only for it to have no impact on the story moving forward and to kind of be like set aside for the last 3 episodes of the season. I also thought we would have a clearer explanation as to what makes Mark and Gemma so special that they were chosen to become the subjects of this massive experiment. I thought that was the whole point of episode 7 and what it was going to lead to. Some people say it's because Gemma had a miscarriage and they wanted to use her as a subject to suppress pain by using Severance, but I don't think that makes sense because episode 7 suggests Lumen had a hand in Mark and Gemma meeting in the first place. Like they were specifically a match made by Lumen way back when, and them meeting was not a coincidence. But we still don't know how Lumen faked Gemma's death, especially since Mark says at the beginning of season 2 that he did identify her dead body at the morgue. And I thought the whole point of episode 7 was to lead into the season showing us how she ended up on the testing floor. Was she kidnapped? Is this something she consented to? I assume season 3 is going to address it fairly early on now that Gemma is free, but it was still bizarre to me that all of this was set up only to, again, not be mentioned again for the last 3 episodes of the season. I don't know, man. All of that to say, while season 2 is an absolutely remarkable, truly masterful season of television, to me, in my humble and frankly irrelevant opinion, it didn't reach the immaculate perfection of season 1, and those were my personal reasons why. But honestly, that's not saying much because, bruh, the season is fire. It's so good. There's tons of theories about season 3. People believe that Mark is the illegitimate child of James Egan and Harmony Cobell, which would be in correlation with the scene of James saying he sired children in secret, and the scene where Harmony tells Mark she cares for him at the birthing cabin. That would be wild because that would effectively make Mark and Helena half siblings, and they had sex twice this season. Oh, and speaking of which, a lot of people believe Helena Egan is now pregnant with Mark's child, which is absolutely diabolical if they're half siblings, but would create an insanely complex issue, not only because of the reality that Mark couldn't have a child with Gemma, but he will now have one with a fucking Egan, but also because of the logistics behind that child. Whose child is it? Is it Mark S's and Helly R's? Is it Helena Egan's child? What are the legalities of Mark Scout becoming the father of a child that was conceived without his knowledge because of his innie? The mere thought of that scenario breaks my brain. I don't know what I think about any of these theories. I don't necessarily buy into them. I'm just very honestly hoping that this show doesn't just turn out to be a giant love triangle. Like, I don't need "see you at the equator" to become a line that's repeated in the show all the time because it became symbolism for Mark and Helly's love story. You know what I mean? I want the show to keep focusing on its story and its characters and not get carried away with its own newfound popularity, which is going to come with extreme elevation of ships. And I have seen too many great American shows get popular and lean way too much into fan interactions to the point where everything becomes about the ships and the story is ruined because of it, because the story itself is no longer the priority. I am praying that this show doesn't do that. There's way too much I'm excited for the show to explore. All of the mystery behind Lumen is something I genuinely have not been able to stop thinking about for the last 3 years. I am so excited to find out more about all the mystery surrounding the characters. I'm excited for the show to dive more into Milchick. The very slow turn of this character's stability at Lumen is so complex and fascinating. Between the racist microaggressions, the purposeful belittling, and the constant berating of his vocabulary, the devour feculence scene is the highlight of episode 9. It is so satisfying to watch him stand up for himself like this, literally talking back to Keir Egan in the finale. I love this character. He unfortunately took kind of a backseat in the finale, being stuck in a bathroom for like 40 minutes, so I'm very excited to discover more about him and to see where he's going to go from here. I'm also very excited to see the big picture with the character of Harmony Cobell. What are her plans? How is she planning on getting back at Lumen? What secrets is she keeping? Why did she freeze and run away in that one scene where she saw this guy staring at her next to Elena? Give me more. I wanna know. Severance is a one-of-a-kind type of show. We're very lucky to have it, especially in the current state of television. We are lucky, and by God, I expect you people to act accordingly. I just wanted to share my thoughts about this season. It's just so cool to have a new show that reunites everybody once a week to nerd out about the way Game of Thrones did pre-pandemic. I cannot wait for season 3. Ben Stiller promised it wouldn't take another 3 years to get a new season, so hopefully it comes out like in 2027 and we can feel joy again and praise Keir or whatever these people do. I've said before that I hope Severance doesn't go on for too long and that it ends when the story feels finished. Dan Erickson has since confirmed that they do know what the end of the story is and they have a pretty solid idea of how many seasons there will do, so that's good news. I have a feeling the show is going to be 4 seasons, but in my ideal world, season 3 is announced to be the last, and it's just as good as the first 2 seasons, and we have a historical piece of television to look back on forever. But only time will tell. So until then, devour feculence, motherfuckers! Gretchen!
She's a queen bee, she thinks she's so carefree. She forgot she knows me from that night in Bali. It's okay though, doesn't bruise my